So now I want to introduce Dan Allen, who will be moderating this panel, which is going to explore the economic viability of urban agriculture. Dan is the CEO of Farmscape. It's an urban farming venture based in Los Angeles. They've set up more than 350 gardens at homes, schools, and restaurants. He's a master gardener. He's a member of the LA Food Policy Council's working group on urban agriculture, and also a periodic contributor to the Huffington Post and Seedstock, which is our website, seedstock.com. I'll let Dan take it from here.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Robert, and I look forward to hopefully leading a thoughtful discussion on connecting urbanites to the food system. I wanted to start by having all the panelists take a couple minutes to introduce themselves and their projects, so you kind of have a sense of their perspective as they answer some of the questions. And I'll start with Tara Kolla here to my left.
Hello, everyone. So my name's Tara. I started Silver Lake Farms 10 years ago. It's the 10th anniversary in 2014, so super excited about that. We started off as a flower farm. We got shut down, so then I started a CSA, which is still running. We're in our 4th year, so don't join his, join mine. And then we also do what Dan does. We install and maintain vegetable gardens around Los Angeles. And so those are the 3 legs that Silver Lake Farm stands on. But at the heart of us is all urban, local agriculture.
Great. Thanks, Tara. Rickey?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rickey Smith, and my organization is Urban Green. This November, we celebrate our 12th anniversary. My organization is we try to interrelate the disciplines of cuisine, land use, environment, architecture, and put everything into a regenerative package. Our goal is to create a cradle-to-cradle food system, first in Los Angeles and then move it along the region of the West Coast. Right now we have 3 small-scale gardens farms. We have an affiliate farm in the City of Industry with 7 acres. And what I've tried to do with urban farming is take undervalued and sometimes polluted or undervalued land in a dense urban area, build an urban farm. And what we've been doing is feeding our own system. We take the yield and incorporate that with the stuff we pick up at the various farmers markets that we support, and we create food products for wholesale and for our community.
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel Surls with University of California Cooperative Extension. The last group talked a lot about land-grant universities and their role working with farmers. I'm part of California's land-grant university is the University of California, and I work in the Los Angeles County Cooperative Extension Office in Sustainable Food Systems. And since I started doing that, I've worked a lot on urban agriculture. I just want to quickly mention 2 projects that I think may be of interest to some of you. One is we've been working on a statewide needs assessment for urban agriculture and cooperative extension in California to sort of figure out where is the match between the limited resources we have, because we've been stretched very thin by retirements with no new budget influx and budget cuts, and where can our resources and our expertise meet the needs of urban farmers around California. So we've been out interviewing urban farmers around the state, and I've had a lot of opportunities to go see urban farms and talk to urban farmers and learn more about their operations. So that's been very interesting. And now we're moving into the next phase of that project, which is developing some materials for urban farmers. The second project is I've had the great pleasure of being the client for the Cultivate Los Angeles study that was conducted by some UCLA urban planning graduate students. They did this amazing survey of urban agriculture in Los Angeles County, very comprehensive, looked at zoning codes in all of our 88 cities and unincorporated areas, talked to teachers at school gardens, and mapped all the urban agriculture in LA. So we now have all this great baseline data to see where can we go from here.
Good morning. My name is Chris Higgins. I'm one of the owners of Hort Americas, and we're a wholesale supply company focusing on commercial greenhouses. That covers both floriculture and vegetable production in the greenhouse. I also own a small e-publication called Urban Ag Products, where we take a look at the different obstacles controlled environment agriculturalists are facing in building their business. So we span the gamut of low tech, medium tech, and high tech commercial greenhouses.
Wonderful. I wanted to start with just a pretty straightforward question, but Tara, what do you kind of think of as the role of urban farming, whether it's food production or flower production, and what role do you see it playing in the future of cities?
Well, I think the role that I see it playing is just bringing everything closer to home. It's all about being more sustainable as communities, multiple communities, as cities, as a culture. And you know, weaning ourselves off gasoline and just transporting, producing things closer to home and transporting them over a lesser distance, which means eating seasonally, enjoying seasonal flowers. And I think that's going to require a mind shift. But in the long run, everything that I do is all about being more sustainable and bringing everything closer to home.
Yeah, kind of along the same lines, Rickey, I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit about your mission with your project.
Well, the mission that we have is one that's probably shared in this room. What I like to see us be a part of is the evolution of the food system, first in the United States. I think that this is happening around the world, and I feel that the United States, although the will is there of the people, we need to move quicker because there's great examples in other countries of it working. And in involving this food system, what I hope to see is a transformation and also a regeneration of our urban centers. There's so much of a disconnect, with different parts of our population about where their food comes from. And just in my personal experience, I've seen great personal transformation when they do have that connection. The fourth thing I would like to see, and as part of our mission, is that people realize that long term this makes economic sense. My impetus for doing this was I was planning on leaving the country because I'm 50 years old. I grew up privileged to have a government-paid education, and it just wasn't the same country that I grew up in, so I was a little disillusioned. And when I did decide to stay, I realized that the infrastructure had not been regenerated or taken care of in this country, and that there was a disconnect, and people were not connected to their food. So if I was going to stay, I needed a purpose to help for what I feel is a positive change.
Yeah, and Chris, I imagine you come at things from a slightly different perspective, working at controlled environment agriculture. Talk to me kind of what urban agriculture means to you and the different scales of projects that you work on in that context.
Yeah, for me personally, it's, I've got my personal opinions and then I've got our business opinions. And from a business perspective, urban agriculture is really about creating new opportunities for farms. Now, I'm not going to say in trying to define what size those farms are. I really don't want to define whether it's a low-tech or a high-tech farm. But I think looking at it from a business opportunity, there are plenty of opportunities to bring controlled environment agriculture to different cities around our country and throughout the world. What we look at is probably larger scale than what's been being discussed here. I think there's a certain scalability that needs to occur in order to give longevity to this movement. And we visited Howlings yesterday, and I think, that's a family-run business. If you look at their total production space, it's in the neighborhood of 88 acres there, 125 acres, yeah. So if you take BC, they're going to be expanding another location in the United States soon. If you take all of that production space, to me, that's a family farm. But, in some of the definitions we've given already today, 125 acres may not be seen as a family farm.
That makes sense. And Rachel, I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit about the spectrum of projects that you kind of came up with when they did that survey of urban ag in Los Angeles.
Yeah, the students who were urban planning graduate students first had to grapple with defining urban agriculture because it means different things to different people. To some people it means homesteading in their backyard. To other people it means only something that's commercial in nature where you're selling what you grow. So they came up with a fairly inclusive definition that included things like school gardens, which, as you know, probably can be tiny. They can be some containers on the blacktop, or they can be very large, like the Muir Ranch in Pasadena. So even school gardens are at different scales. Urban agriculture is definitely at different scales that we've looked at. I've been to a for-profit urban farm that was in someone's front and backyard, and they were managing to grow enough for 2 farmers markets at that scale. And I've also visited a farmer who was growing on 1,000 combined acres. And this is an urban farm. It's in a very urbanized area. And as he told me, we didn't come to the city came to us. It's a 3rd-generation farm where they no longer own their land, and they haven't for many years. They lease property. Some of it's, private property that's going to be developed at some point. Other is public land that's available for some reason. And so these pieces of land are patched together into a farm that's quite profitable. And it's 1,000 acres when you add it all up. So urban agriculture can look very different, and it encompasses many different things.
Yeah, and kind of pivoting off of that, one of the critiques I hear, and it's something that I think you were hinting at, Chris, is that what we think of as urban ag in cities a lot of times has great missions that it accomplishes, but the scalability or the replicability of it on a large scale is often kind of doubted. Do you guys think that's a fair criticism? I don't know what you think, Tara.
Well, I think that I operate on 2 sites, and altogether it's just shy of 1 acre. But I managed to get 9 months at market out of that space. And I have 1 part-timer work in the field 2 days a week. And then so it's not, I'm not doing it like all the time. Now, I think that if I had 1 more growing ground that was about 5,000 square feet, I could be at market 12 months of the year. And so my model, I think, is scalable, but the sites have to be very specific and fairly close by. I think the minute I start to travel too far from site to site, I'm going to lose efficiencies. But I think that there's room for expansion. I think every urban farm is going to be unique.
Mm-hmm. And kind of along the same lines, Rickey, it's something I've been asked by some of the people in the audience, but what does a good urban farming job look like?
Well, I think that is being defined. I don't think there's a real, I couldn't give you a truthful answer for that. I like what I'm doing, and I can describe it in that every day is unique with its own unique challenges, things that need to be accomplished, not always having all the information right or wrong to move forward, but moving forward nevertheless, and learning from the things that work and learning from the mistakes. I think a good, urban farming or urban agriculture job is diverse in your skill set. I do, water, my gardens. Sometimes I'm there at 4 a.m. and then I'm 9 o'clock. I'm at a production facility making a pesto from the kale that I just picked. And then that afternoon, I'm meeting with a client who's interested in what we do. And so I have to brush the dirt off of me and be able to talk, numbers and business with them. I think that it's a fallacy that it doesn't make economic sense. I've been in business 12 years. This is a concept I presented to a Fortune 500 company maybe in 1986. All those companies that are large in scale, including Walmart and other companies, are moving toward our area now. People debate whether that's good or bad, but it proves that there's something there.
Yeah. And Chris, kind of how do you see urban agriculture continuing to evolve? I mean, you kind of hinted at if it's going to be a bigger part of our food system, us needing to kind of focus on the scalable models. So could you describe maybe what some of those scalable models look like?
Well, I think greenhouses provide one option. We've seen some fairly interesting concepts with vertical farms in completely controlled environments. I think geography plays a big role in this. I mean, obviously, if we're in Southern California, it's a little bit easier to grow year-round than if we're going to be in Boston, you know, or where I grew up in Michigan. So I think that I'm not sure. I think I agree with these two. I think it has a lot of different faces, and what works here in California may or may not work in other areas. I can tell you, living in Dallas, it's going to have to be a very unique model to make it through the summertime. so you know, it's just really going to depend on where you're located at.
Yeah. And Rachel, I know you've studied kind of the evolution of agriculture in LA County over the last century. Do you have any kind of sense of what the next century of agricultural development will look like in the area?
Well, you know, I think we first started to see this intense interest in backyard vegetable gardening, even more so interest in school gardening and community gardening and backyard homesteading. Started to see that more in 2008, and I think it has something to do with the economy, that when people have a sense of insecurity about their jobs, about their ability to support themselves and to control their lives, they gravitate towards wanting to produce food, control their food supply. And, you know, I sort of look to the future and I see rising food prices. I see, you know, global warming that's going to really complicate matters as far as producing our food. I see growing population. So to me, all those things say that small-scale agriculture, even micro-scale agriculture, like what we think of when we talk about urban farming oftentimes, is going to be something that's going to continue into the future, because it will have to be a piece of the picture of people being able to feed themselves. And it already is in a lot of other countries.
Nice. And then Tara, I know you've thought a lot about kind of policies that would help move the ball forward. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience both on the Food, Flowers, and Freedom Act, and then what policies you kind of see being important toward continuing to make forward progress toward.
So what Dan's referring to, the Food and Flowers Freedom Act, was the result of having been shut down in 6 years after setting Silver Lake Farms up to be a flower farm, which, by the way, when you, just for what it's worth, when we talk about agriculture, please remember flower farmers work really hard too, and they're very much a part of our agriculture sector. But anyway, the Food and Flowers Freedom Act, so after 6 years at market, somebody discovered that, well, somebody shut me down. And they said, interpreted the law as you can't sell the flowers that you grow in a residential zone. You can just grow them, but you can't sell them. That's how the law was interpreted. And because, of course, as you all know, it doesn't make any sense given our current, economic climate. So City Council, we went to City Hall and they changed that law, and it took a year. They basically clarified the law so that now, how I see it is that urban farming is totally legal. You can grow fruit and flowers and fibers and vegetables and sell in a residential zone and sell it off-site. Now, the whole act of selling, to me, makes it farming, because to me, farming has a commercial bent. And so now you can do that. Now, not so much what policies need to happen now. I think it's less. I think the policies are there. I mean, now you can actually grow in the parkways, right? Mm-hmm. So now you can grow legally foodstuffs in your parkways, and presumably sell that too, because of the Food Plus Freedom Act. You can now, thanks to Mark Stambler, who's a bread baker, California now has a cottage food act, and so now, in my case, let's say I want to grow, I grow edible flowers. I can then candy those edible flowers in my kitchen and sell those candied edible flowers, which, by the way, is a huge profit margin. So if you, Anderson School of Management, come up with a model, please. Because we could take it away from the French, because the French candy lavender and and mimosa flowers, acacia flowers, and there's a huge markup. So, but it's very labor intensive. Anyway, so what was I saying?
No, I think that's a good point, though. There's definitely lower barriers to growing food in urban settings.
Yeah, so the barriers are down. Like now it seems open. The only thing preventing it now, and I speak from very personal experience, and this is what I mean when I say that urban farms are going to be really unique. Each one, because it's urban, which means a residential zone, it's going to be unique. Well, it doesn't just mean a residential zone, but you have to include them, right? So it's going to depend on the people immediately around you and how they feel about what you're doing on the street, in their hood, in your community. I've been accused of changing the character of the neighborhood. Now, I think I've changed it for the better, but my neighbors think that I've ruined it, and I just don't understand why. I just don't. I'm still baffled. They're still on me, but I
can
ignore
answer
it.
that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, my personal experience, like I said, I started my business as a legitimate business in September 2001. It was a week before, 9/11. And in 2004, I was shut down by the Los Angeles Health Department because they, for some reason, I was supposed to be cooking out of my home. I had a kitchen that was borrowing, which was Pioneer Bakery, the old Pioneer Bakery over in Wilshire. And this health official didn't like the way I was doing business, the fact that I used chalkboards, that I was using sample cups that were recyclable. He wanted me to use a plastic and put a top on. So some of the things that I was doing to adhere to our internal policy of being environmental went against Los Angeles Health Department law. And for some reason, so he shut me down for, well, it didn't shut me down. John Garricochet gave me his kitchen, was away in France, and I couldn't reach him, so I couldn't get a letter saying, hey, this guy's using his kitchen. And so that's when I started looking at it. So that moved me into other markets. So I've had a personal experience like that. We're building a food jungle in the center of a really industrial area right now. And to answer your question, Tara, it seems like a lot, I get the same response, and it's the fact that people aren't connected to the land. They're afraid to see things grow, change, die. A person came and said, oh, you have insects or worms in your bin. And they just didn't understand, and this is dying when they've never seen a tomato plant, I guess, die on the vine. So there was a real big disconnect between them, and I don't know how you handle that. I just continue going and try to be patient with them and not present myself as an expert, but trying to explain that it's part of the life cycle.
What Rickey's saying, you said about the health department, and that's true. There was a case in Silver Lake where backyard gardeners were were harvesting and taking it to a local restaurant called
Forage.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so Forage got shut down by the health department. And so I stepped in and talked to one of those growers and said, that doesn't make any sense, because if that same person growing a cauliflower took it to Forage to sell it, they could take that cauliflower to market and sell it, and no one would shut them down. So what's the difference? And the difference is it's health department versus ag department. So what I suggested was everybody growing for forage needs to get an ag certificate, which is become a certified producer, which costs $63 a year, and become certified. And then if they continue to supply forage and then the health department comes in and says, oi, you can't do that, then you can just say, talk to ag. So what it is, again, it's all about change. The health department and the ag department need to be on the same page. I don't think that's happened yet.
And I don't think that they do these things to harm. They are following policies, but I think oftentimes their policies are in conflict with what's best for the public, for the public's concern, and they're just following, verbatim what they see. And my life has been a lot easier understanding that they're not going to change. So when that conflict does come up, how can I comply with what they need and still, hold my integrity and move forward? When I was shut down, that's when I started selling to, wholesaling. So it also opened up my mind to a new market. It was negative and very hard when it happened, but that's something negative I used to open a new market and benefit me. And I prefer the new market to the traveling show of putting stuff on my back and going to the farmer's market. I enjoy it, but we were doing 10 or 12 farmers markets, which is very hard.
Yeah. And Rachel, I was wondering, you've been active on the LA Food Policy Council since its inception, and I was wondering if there were any other policy issues, whether they've mentioned already, that you'd wanted to talk about.
Well, I think one of the important policy issues that we hope to move forward now that we have a city council that seems to be very interested in urban agriculture, we need to see some better access to publicly owned vacant land. There are vacant lots throughout the city of Los Angeles that are owned by the city of Los Angeles and that are just sitting there. Yet it's very hard to find out where they are, how to gain access to them. There's no process by which you could apply and expect to get a response and have some fee structure that you could pay. So I think that's next up, is how can we access public land for a reasonable fee, and how can we access water for a reasonable fee for some urban agriculture that currently isn't eligible for the reduced water rate that community gardens get. And we're working on that. And the reason why that land access thing is so critical for farming in the city is because that's one competitive edge that we might have for some communities in Los Angeles to do urban agriculture and be successful with it, is that there is a lot of vacant land and it should be available at a very low cost. Now, it may not always be available. It may be an interim use of that land, but it should be possible to gain access to that land. And in fact, there's a new state law that's going to make it attractive for some private landowners to allow their land to be used for urban agriculture.
Yeah, and that's something that strikes home for us, because I know whenever we look at the possibility of doing more market gardening, just the sheer cost of land kind of changes the economics in a way where it's just not viable for us to do it in an urban setting. And I don't know, Chris, if you could talk a little bit about your observations of different cities and different projects and how the relative cost of land in different places kind of dictates what ends up happening.
Yeah, and it's all over the board. There's certain cities get a lot more, certain stories told about more cities, like Detroit. We're constantly reading different opportunities about Detroit, but policy is also holding them back. I think some of the more high profile, let's say, controlled environment operations are happening in the Northeast, whether that's Gotham Greens, Brooklyn Grange, Sky Greens, Lufa Farms in Quebec. Those are much more high profile, but they're taking a different perspective in terms of getting into business where they're looking for venture capital money. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a big difference between the entry cost for a low-tech facility versus a high-tech facility. And I think it's probably a sexier story for the high-tech facilities, and that's what's getting all the marketing. Yeah. And I should throw Bright Farms in there as well. Those are companies that get a lot of stories told about them. And now we're also moving into the vertical farm space. Where, if we look at Chicago, from the plant to farmed here to other vertical farm facilities, again, you're high tech. So you've got major dollars being invested in these facilities. And I don't think the cost of land is something they're looking at as much as probably the return on investment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and kind of with that in mind, I was thinking about the conversation in the first panel about the efficiency of growing hydroponically in an urban setting and thinking about how expensive land is and how attractive that efficiency is. But I'm sitting next to two people who have chosen to grow in soil in an urban setting. Why?
Because I'm all about soil. I understand the sexiness of greenhouses and aquaponics and hydroponics, and I totally get it. But I don't know, maybe it's just my personality. I just like dirt. No, soil. But I also just like to swim upstream, and so I guess, so I don't use any chemicals. So my whole business was about filling a niche, finding a gap and filling it. And so I did my market research. You know, when I started Silver Lake Farms, I specifically picked flowers, organic flowers, because there weren't any. And so there are, and I can give you some numbers if you don't mind. There are approximately 35 cargo plane loads of cut flowers leaving Colombia and Ecuador, coming to the US each week. That's 35 plane loads of cut flowers from Colombia and Ecuador being imported each week versus 25 trucks of California cut flowers being shipped out of California. And you can fit about 5 to 10 trucks in one of those cargo planes. So that gives you a sense of what an incredible imbalance there is in how much is being imported in terms of cut flowers into this country versus what's being exported just from the state of California. And that imbalance was caused back in '91, by the way, by a federal agreement, which was called the Andean Trade Preferences in '91. And money was given to coca growers in Colombia and Ecuador to stop them from growing coca and encourage them, incentivize them to grow cut flowers. And as a result of that, the California cut flower industry just kind of went, and then all these flowers just started flooding our market. And I read about that, and I also understood from the California Cut Flower Commission, which is doing fabulous work, raising awareness about where our flowers come from and how important it is to buy local. So if you're ever buying flowers, just ask where they come from, because I'm sure if you're given the choice, you'll pick organic and local versus none. So anyway, the California Cut Flower Commission is doing great work, and support it.
Yeah.
If I can jump in, I was going to say, can I jump in on the hydroponic part
Yeah,
real
please.
quick? I think a lot of it also, I'm going to go back to location and geography. I mean, if you're in a climate like Southern California, I was running some numbers with a grower yesterday in Carpinteria. The minimum light levels that you guys are getting here allows you to do things in a more conventional way than if you're going to go to New York or you're going to go to Michigan or Minnesota. I know we got some people in here from Minnesota. You know, if we look at the minimum light requirements to produce certain crops, you're going to have to make an investment in technology if you're going to take this to be in a local movement regardless of geographic location. And the minute you make that investment in technology is the minute that you have to commit to plant density and yield, because otherwise you're never going to pay that investment back. And I think that's
Yeah,
That-
it's numbers.
Yeah, that's what, for 12 years I did it. The reason why I started in the dirt is that reason. My company in 12 years has been self-financed. We were talking about the land. We pay market rates for our land. I had an agreement with the state where I invested a certain amount of money that I was able to deduct my rent, but you know, I didn't recoup that money. That was a $60,000 investment that was never recouped. Having said that, the initial mission was to revitalize and change cities. I saw so much undervalued land. Living in Southern California, had the perfect Mediterranean climate, so it was a perfect proving ground. It was easy entry for me. The original goal was to do rooftops because there's so many you know, blacktop roofs in Los Angeles, but the membranes are a little thin, but the technology is coming up, so you know, we want to focus on that. But it was really about changing cities, seeing vacant lots, seeing brownfields, and converting them into adding value to the land rather than let them lie and be a waste and collect trash. I am not you know, rigidly and you know, with the soil. I don't have the same attitude. I didn't realize the sexiness of some of the things until I saw Howlings yesterday, and it's pulled my skull cap back and made me reevaluate, you know, what I'm doing, because I've been working so hard, and we're viable. We've had about 60% revenue growth, every year, and it's been consistent. We've never had a bad year. But you talk about scale, and I see Howlings, and I know how many hours I'm working a week, and and that's attractive too. As long as it's improving the urban environment for our society and culture, as long as it doesn't have any negative effects, I'm open to it.
I'm also about not using chemicals. So plants need about 17 different nutrients just to do what they do. So, with greenhouses and vertical and aquaponics and all of that, I just don't see how you can grow I don't see how you can grow cauliflowers that way. Cauliflowers are brassicas are super heavy feeders that flower, the flowering brassicas anyway. So I just think that you're not going to be, that isn't going to be the problem solver and the solution. You have to have some element of your crops growing in soil just because of what plants need to thrive.
Chris, I wanted to give you a chance to talk maybe briefly about how you think about the sustainability of hydroponic growing.
I do think it's sustainable. But I do agree with Tara that not every crop fits the current technologies that we have. Right now we efficiently as an industry know how to grow vine crops, and that you could define that as peppers, cucumbers, and tomatoes, with the majority of what we're doing being in tomato production, like we saw yesterday. You could also throw in maybe eggplants and maybe some, depending on your market, if you go to Japan, you're probably going to see things like melons grown this way as well. Then you have your leafy green and herb production that can be done. But that leaves a whole wide open area in the produce section of crops that we're not really doing very well. There's certain areas of Belgium that have figured out hydroponic production of strawberries, but they have a market that allows greenhouse growers to invest in a hydroponic production strawberry system. We've tried that in California, and we've tried that with some big ag guys, and the numbers just don't work in California. We have a couple of things in the United States that make us pretty fortunate, to be honest. When you go into the greenhouse, you still have to compete with field growers. You still have to compete with what's seasonally available. And in the United States, we've got a food system that when, if Florida's having a pretty nice year and California's having a nice year, then it's very difficult to make money on tomatoes and strawberries on the open market. But we're also lucky that, to some degree, climate change has worked in advantage of greenhouse guys, because it's allowed us to create a more consistent climate. And when we figure out vertical farming, it's going to allow us to create the same day every day. And so all of those things that we are having to fight Mother Nature against, and from an innovative standpoint, we'll be able to predict. We'll be able to fine tune and set and probably maximize production. Now, whether or not that's the best way forward, I don't know. It is a way forward.
I agree with you. I don't think there's going to be one way.
Right.
And I think that's good. We talk a lot about biodiversity, and but people want to get in this team or that team, and that's why I want to remain open, because the main point is to serve our society, bring things in local, and just to feed people. I mean, we've been doing it since we came upon the earth, but we're losing the connection to that.
I want to add that one of the things I've seen some urban farmers struggle with is striking that balance between providing food for their community and being profitable. So you may find that to be profitable, you need to grow heirloom Italian vegetables and sell them at the farmer's market in Beverly Hills. But yet, then where does feeding your community come in? So there's a lot of soul searching that goes on and trying to strike that balance, because it can't be all about profitability in order to help sustain our communities. There has to be a balance, and also something Tara and I were talking about just before the presentation is how many urban farms are in a nonprofit or government agency mode. They're really not traditional for-profit ventures. They're run by school districts, by housing developments, public housing developments. They're run by nonprofit organizations. So let's keep in mind that there's a lot of benefits to urban agriculture they're really hard to put a price tag on, things like empowering youth and providing jobs for youth and beautifying the community and creating local food access, that I think at some point we'll be able to put a dollar value on those, but they are benefits of urban agriculture.
And that's one of the reasons I like the controlled environment ag side. And for those, since we were on the field trip yesterday, I'll use that as an example. I think for those of us that were there, we saw the amount of good paying jobs that were created. And my experience with other hydroponic greenhouses around the country and really around the world is there have been a lot of good paying jobs. And then when I do go to university, I was at the University of Arkansas last week giving a presentation on controlled environment agriculture. And the part that I found most interesting about that was the excitement in the young people at working with technology to grow food.
Yeah.
So you're seeing a way to create a good paying job for young people interested in agriculture. And you're also maybe, someone said it earlier about, capturing tomorrow's talent. You may be capturing that engineer that, is looking to innovate food production in some way, or, the person interested in plant physiology. Those are the things I think are interesting.
I have a question. The jobs are higher paying than on a traditional farm, because I'm asking you that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From what my experiences is yes. What are we paying? My experience is yes, because the skill set is much more specific to some degree. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more riding on it, so there's a lot of liability, and people are going after talent that can produce. To give you an example of the variance in production at a facility. So on Monday I was at a greenhouse that grows organic hydroponic tomatoes. Let's say a TOV tomato, their yield was in the neighborhood of 30 to 35 kilos per square meter. If you compare that to what Howlings is doing and the system that they're running, their yield is in excess of 110 kilos per square meter at the new facilities. So there is, when you talk about these job opportunities, or you talk about the return on investment, there's a big area there as well, depending on really what your facility is capable of.
And that's why I'm reconsidering, because we have a lot of good people, but I value them so much. I pay them as much as I can. We pay more than a living wage, but that's still not even enough. And it's wonderful to have those people that are committed and dedicated and remain with you. But as a leader in the organization, you want to do more for them, and that's one of the things I'm considering.
In 10 years of Silver Lake Farms, I've always getting labor has been the hardest thing. I can produce, no problem, but I can't find people. Because here's an example. I put out an actually paid job. It was a paid job, and I advertised it, and I got like 2 resumes, and one of them was the kitchen garden, head of the kitchen garden for the French Laundry. And I was like, I'll pay you double to come down and work. Like, to have him would have been a complete honor, but he ended up getting a job working for some fancy winery, and I couldn't get him. And then I put out a notice saying that I was looking for volunteers, and that in exchange for 20 hours a week, I would offer a CSA share. And I got flooded with responses to that, which tells me there's a lot of people in LA who want to get involved, but they don't have the skills and they're not confident to be paid for it. And even the people that I have paid, they're young, they're under 30, and they don't have the sticking power. Yeah. So they're with you for a year and then they move on. And I'm like, I can't build a business around people moving on. Yeah. You have to stay. So I think that you can't leave. And so with the technology, I think they're going to have a much better job of getting the sticking power, because back to that word sexy, it's much sexier to work with technology and equipment and science. But we're just, working soil and making compost teas. And we are not hippies, though. We are not hippies. I'm a businesswoman, and I'm looking at the cost of everything, and I'm looking at my profit, and I'm looking at, I want to get into the Santa Monica Farmers Market because I need it. I need the volume, but Laura Avery won't let me in. So I have to rely on Sunday's Hollywood Farmers Market and make bank, and I have to sell. I work so hard just to sell. Yeah. But anyway, so sticking power and getting people to stay is really hard. And I pay well, too.
Because it's hard work. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it's
really
hard.
hard work, and you're asking people. I do a lot of the work myself, and I don't ask my people to do anything I haven't done or wouldn't do. And now I'm focusing more on the farming and sending my people out to the farmers markets, and then that's another thing that you're paying them $10 an hour, and you want them to represent you, and what kind of to be honest, what kind of quality person, you have to be real careful with the quality of the person that's going to represent you. They have to adhere to the farmers market policy. They have to know health department, and I build, in my money box there's a whole set of 15 things that they're supposed to do, and I'm trying to build structure with paperwork, and it's really hard for someone that you're paying that level to get them to check off each and every thing. So even though I'm not there, I can look and say, okay, yes, the 3 sides were put up, and yes, that is 10 feet away. So
I think for a traditional urban farm where we're growing in the ground, one of the things that I think is key to the success of a in the ground, of a soil-based urban farm is profit share. So I have this dream of having Silver Lake Farms become the kind of company where everyone is invested. It's not just me, because I don't do this to make money, clearly. I do it because it's right. It seems like the right thing to do. 9/11 was a landmark thing for me. I formed Silver Lake Farm shortly after 9/11 because I just thought, oh my God, we're fighting for oil, and this is ridiculous. Sustainability and local production is key, and that I saw was the future. But I think that also just purely focusing on bottom line profit is also passé, and that now we need to think about building businesses where our employees participate, not just their weekly or bi-monthly wage, but profit, so that they are invested, so that they are invited and paid to give a hoot about what they're doing and why they're doing it, and to stay. So profit sharing, I think, is a model.
I think the community should get profit share. It's like.
And yeah, I was just going to say real quick, if people wanted to start queuing up for questions, we've kind of reached that point. And while people queue up, I had one last question I wanted to ask Rachel, which is if there are some of the 20 and 30 somethings that Tara mentioned who are looking to get some of those skills so that they're hireable by urban ag businesses, what resources would you point them to?
Well, I think we have some close at hand. Cal Poly Pomona, Mount San Antonio College, Pierce College, and then, farther afield, there's UC Davis. There's many great ag colleges, and a lot of them now are offering programs in sustainable food systems, small-scale agriculture, and there's many opportunities to get trained. For somebody who wants a short training program, there's also a fantastic program at UC Santa Cruz called the Agroecology program, where you go for 6 months and are totally immersed in this small-scale farming experience. And in terms of the urban farmers up in the Bay Area, that program from Santa Cruz seems to be a real feeder for the urban farmers up there. People go through that program, they find land, and they start farming. So we don't really have a similar institution down here, but I would really recommend that program to anybody who wants to have a very hands-on kind of training.
Let's go to the microphone on the left.
Hi, this is Mike Nadell from Danson Seed Company. I'm addressing this towards Rickey because he had made some mention of rooftop farming here in LA. I'm just curious if any of you have been involved in or currently active in rooftop farming, because I thought this was one area that really is overlooked.
A project that I considered but didn't do because of the cash outlay was a building owner in downtown. Near Santee Court, and it was a garment factory, and this building owner contacted me, and I went to look at the facility, and I wanted to do a co-investment, but they wanted us to do his building. And I've gotten involved in projects where I've invested money in infrastructure that wasn't mine. And then, 5 years later, I'm gone, and I'm leaving $14,000, for Trozzel, towel. So I haven't found that perfect project. There's organizations like Loma Development that has opened up a new place in Pasadena called The Shed. I've worked with them in the past, and they have a perfect situation. So I think with their new facility that they might be considering that. That's the only one that I know is close to fruition. The drawback with there's so many positive with Los Angeles. The drawback is the thin membrane roofs, but there's new technology in rubberizing these roofs to maybe circumvent that problem. The way when I actively was going out to pitch this idea to building owners, it was to make economic sense. One, you could have your employees go up to eat rather than down, and we see many large organizations like Google, and I'm working with some companies like Supercare that provide lunches and food for their employees just to keep employees there happy and working longer. I was looking for tax write-offs for preventing water runoff that just goes down from the building, all that pollution down into our water system and out into the ocean. And also the fact that they can reduce their energy costs. So there's real economic reasons to do it, but Los Angeles is not embracing it the way I would like.
Chris, have you seen anything along those lines?
I mean, there's rooftop farming, and that really should be split up into two areas. You have the rooftop farm where you have a low-tech farm. You build a soil profile on the rooftop, and more in the Northeast than on the West Coast. And then you have greenhouse rooftop farms. My biggest question to start with when I talk to people about this is why? Why are we going to go through all the hassle to go on the rooftop depending on what property and space is available in your local area? Talking about, undeveloped land by the city, brownfields. There's so much other space that unless you're in an area, and I could speak for a project in New York, where they had to go to the rooftop because any other place they were going to be, they were in a canyon with buildings surrounding them and no natural light. Unless you're in a space like that, I think the stakeholder in the project really needs to ask why, because it's going to be an expensive project. To move product up and down, the logistics of growing up there, harvesting, delivering, all those things that go in it, it just really raises the cost.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank
Thanks. Next question.
I'm Michelle Keller with Living Greens Aeroponic Farms, grow lettuce. My question to any of you who can answer this, through this urban farming, what percentage do you guys are hoping to capture the market? Say 1% of the fruit production or food production going to market, 2%, 10%, compared to the other farmers that are producing the CSAs or the other farmers that are supplying your area?
I don't even think like that. I don't think about market share and capturing. I just think about the gap and filling it.
Rickey?
Yesterday, we had a most amazing tour that Seedstock provided where I got to see high-tech growing and traditional growing. The high-tech person was not organic, which is, something that I'd like to remain. But the reason why they were not organic, it was, quote, a pain in the butt, and the market wasn't big enough for them to, because they are high-tech, there's a big capital investment they weren't able to recoup. The organic traditional farmer was more of a cheerleader that organics is growing, and I talk from my personal experience, people talk skinny, they eat fat, they speak environment, but when it comes down to pay the real costs, they're not really willing to open their pocketbooks, they'd rather have an iPad. So my answer to you is I'm trying to create my own market. I'm hoping that people spend money with us because we share their values and we share the concern for them. I'm trying to build an internal system rather than, I'm a little different than, Tara. I'm trying to build an internal system where we have diversified revenue streams. I'm doing the farmer's market. I'm beginning the manufacturing of food for wholesale. I contacted an artist because we go out to the Angeles Crest Forest and help the forest system remove falling logs, and we're going to be creating furniture. So my definition of urban farming, and to answer your question, is much more broad. We are looking to diversify revenue streams because when I was shot down by the health department, that's what saved me. And so that's the way we're looking to proceed. So we're looking to create our own market. I think organics is what, 10, can you help me with this, Chris? Is it 10% of the?
Of fresh,
produce?
Of fresh produce. And
Yeah.
that's one of the keys is you have your produce market, then you have your fresh produce market, and you have your food service market. And whether it's organics or urban agriculture, we as an industry are still in the infancy. We have not really started to scratch the surface of what volume is out there to sell into. And I work with some really big farmers, but even they know that there's still only a very small percentage. I know I can speak for Chipotle on this one. I know that they have a goal of giving 1% of their produce purchase to local farmers. They can't rely on local farmers to meet that 1%. Because something will go wrong, they'll lose a crop, and they're not mad with the local farmers. It's just they have to make sure that big ag is behind them. And I say big ag, and I like big ag personally, but they have to make sure that big ag is behind them because they know that the local challenge in terms of keeping that consistent supply to keep their business running is really a big challenge. So I think we're just scratching the surface. I don't know where the future will lead, but we are scratching the surface.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, I do care about building a market. It's not the focus of what we do, but I have to care about it because I have a payroll to make.
Yeah.
And when people have their lives, my organization supports 7 families, and they need what they need, and they need it when they want it. So I have to have an eye on the market, but that's not what drives what we do. And what I'm hoping is by creating this value and creating a new way of doing things, that it will create a new market rather than trying to compete against people I can't, like Subway,
Right.
and by creating diverse revenue streams, like I said before.
I agree with Ricky and Chris too. It's such a fledgling stage, even after having been doing this for 10 years. I'm still trying to figure out just I'm still tweaking what I do to make it more efficient and make it more profitable. But so I don't think about market share because what I'm thinking about is just plain survival, like how to make this work, because we're making it up as we go along and still doing that. And so at some point, I hope to be able to be at a point where I can think, okay, who am I going to take out? But that's not how I think anyway, in market share. But it's just, I'm happy to be gaining the momentum that I have been, and happy to command the sales that I do.
And we got just a minute or two before lunch, so let's take one last question.
Hey guys, you guys mentioned labor. I work in the industry in many ways, and definitely the toughest part of it. Given the fact that we're in kind of conflict with the fast food industry, would kind of stealing their labor and giving them the $15 an hour that they want be an option? Train those guys to come on over and work in a more sustainable industry?
I've done that. I've paid more. I've paid 17 and 15, and those people did not work out. It didn't improve things. In fact, the person that I keep giving raise, they started at minimum wage. They're at $17 now, but they work their way up. when I paid more money, I didn't see better results. And it's very difficult when your people are coming to you and like, man, I'm only making $10 an hour. I'm not making it. I understand that. But there's nothing more than that I could really pay them. And so it's, I don't want to say this, and to say this makes, when I think this it bothers me, but I have to be the adult. I have to be looking at the long term. And also what I've seen with labor is that I can give this person a $2 raise or the $4 raise, but with the hours they're working, it's not going to make a difference in their life. And I have a unique perspective in that I left the corporate sector. When I left the corporate sector, I was making six figures. When I came to LA, I was here lost without a reason. And so I worked for $5, we're making over $100,000 a year. The first job I had here, because I was on unemployment from Chicago, was $5 an hour underneath the table in Westwood. And that's where I came from. And so when people said, I need that $1 raise, that $2 raise, I say, I need you to continue. This is where we're improving. This is where we need to go. And I need you to commit, because you've only been here for 6 months or a year. You've been doing this for 12 years. So it's trying to convey the long-term picture to them. And you want to have those people with you.
Yeah.
And you do everything. I pay my people before, I get paid. I don't take a salary. There's no draw, because we've continued to reinvest what profits we do have to reach our business goals and our social mission. And so to answer your question, it's just hard, and it's going to be hard to pull those people from fast food jobs and McDonald's. When they work at those jobs, there is a sheet in front of them that tells them step by step how to make that, I don't eat at McDonald's, but whatever the
Sandwich.
Happy Meal or something like that. Okay? I'm one individual. I'm finding to have the people I'm paying, $10 and above, I still have to have that list. So the more people I bring in, it's more time that I have to spend training. And so it's a catch-22, but it must be done. And to answer your question, I am going to consider that. I'm willing to try anything and to see if it works.
And I'm just going to add to what he said. I think it's important to remember that we are in an emerging market. And as being in an emerging market, quality, I think we should pay money. I think we should invest in our talent as long as they're talented. Mm-hmm. We have a big struggle, because everything that we're talking about today is we're kind of fighting the system. And doing this, we're in a sector where we need creative thinkers and talented individuals that will help us build our businesses, regardless of what area of the business we're in. If we can get those people, then I think we should invest in keeping them. But I think they need to almost prove to us as small business owners that they're worth investing first.
Yeah. They don't want to do that.
Well, I know that.
and it needs to be problem solvers. It has to be creative problem solvers, because there's many creative people, but they get caught in the problem. Like, these are the resources we have, but you have to accomplish the goals anyway.
Go research it.
There's Google.
Just Google it.
So I'm looking at the clock and seeing it's lunchtime. So let's eat the next panels at 1:40 on the local ag supply chain. And thanks to my other panelists for